Airmen's Association. My name's Adam White, and it is time for the January 2026 Advocacy with Adam. We've got a couple of things to talk about that are pretty good, pretty big significance. One of them is more than just big significance, it's big when it comes to airspace. So first off, let's go ahead and get started. I guess the weather has been interesting for most of us around the state. I know here in the interior, we actually have had a real winter, not like what we've had in previous years. It's been a normal winter again with some significant cold temperatures for extended periods of time. And then those of you in South Central with winds and other things that seem to be just every single weekend for about a month. And then, of course, Southeast has had significant amounts of snowfall and then rain. I was in Juneau a couple of weeks ago, and interesting to see what do you do with 80 inches of snow that fall in a big storm, and then several inches of rain that comes after it. Same thing for the west coast of the state. Big storms keep hitting the west coast as well. But hopefully, you've been able to do a little bit of flying so far this winter. I know my flying has been curtailed just a little bit because of the extreme cold. 55 below, 60 below, I'm not going to go flying in that. Then some maintenance issues and other things because it's that time of year, right? So let's go ahead and just jump in and get started. Again, two main issues I'm going to deal with this month, one of them more than the other. I'm going to start off with the first one. The FAA has released their unleaded fuel transition plan, and I'm referencing my notes here to make sure I get everything correct. The transition plan has been released. It's not a rule. It's not a notice of proposed rulemaking. So it's not a very formal, rigid thing, but they are asking for public input and some comments. Those comments are due by March 13th of this year. Some specific things that we can help them with here in Alaska is what are our concerns about a transition to an unleaded fuel here in Alaska. You've heard me talk about this before. I've talked to the FAA about this a lot. I've talked to the Eagle Initiative, the folks that are helping the FAA with this transition. It's an industry government partnership. I've been participating in that quite a bit. Talked to a lot of people that are involved with this process. Talked to some of the fuel manufacturers, the folks that are coming up with the candidate fuels. Voiced our concerns there. Talked to supply chain and distribution with Crowley and other folks about some of our concerns. And I'm encouraged, to be honest with you, I'm encouraged that they're listening to our concerns, and it's not just me saying these things. There's a lot of other people saying it as well, and they're listening. But the FAA specifically is wanting to make sure that we do this correctly. The FAA is still standing by their statement that they are not looking to determine a winner. They want the industry to determine the winner. And we've talked about that before, that could be a good thing. But my concern is that we here in Alaska may be left out of that, because while we do burn a significant amount of 100 low lead, we don't burn enough of it to dictate how the rest of the country makes this transition. We also know that our conditions here in Alaska, as we have just talked about, with weather is a little extreme compared to the rest of the country. We also know that our distance and supply chain issues are a little different than other parts of the country. The FAA acknowledges that. There's a specific part of this transition plan where they talk about Alaska-specific issues and wanting to make sure we get it right. So again, we've got an extra 2 years from the lower 48 in the desired date to switch over to an unleaded fuel. So that gives us a little bit more time to make that transition once we have figured out what that fuel will be. So again, so March 13th, 2026, that's what I was looking for, was the date for public comments to be filed. I'll put in the comments below in the description, probably most likely in the description, a link to the Federal Register notice about their transition plan and where you can comment on that. It will be in that Federal Register notice. So I do encourage you to participate in letting the FAA know what we're concerned about as Alaska aviators about a transition away from leaded fuel. Fuel being able to operate and work and be just as effective at cold temperatures, extreme cold temperatures like we've had here in the interior, 50 to 60 below, long-term storage, and then compatibility with all this aircraft systems, not just the ability to make the engine produce horsepower. We've got to make sure that the soft components of our fuel systems are going to be able to handle and hold up to this fuel, even in long-term storage in the aircraft. So lots of things to consider with that. Okay, so here is the main topic of discussion for this month. Where do we start? The military has proposed changing their military operations areas here in the state of Alaska. It's a significant change. It is a proposal. That's what it is right now. We are in the very first step of this proposal. We are in the public scoping phase of this proposal, and it is going to be a long process, but actually they're trying to expedite this as much as possible, but it's going to be a process. The short answer is the military airspace that we have today is not sufficient for what the military tries to get done. I remember in 1995 when the JPARC, the Joint Pacific Alaska Range Complex, first came online. There were some military operations areas prior to that, but this whole complex of airspace, when it first came online in 1995, that was a big deal. 13 years ago, we finished the process of revising that airspace. Those of you probably remember dropping the Fox MOA down to 500-foot AGL, expanding the boundaries of that, some other stuff that happened with that 13 years ago. So it seems like just yesterday, we were just doing this, but it was 13 years ago, so it wasn't just yesterday. A lot of things have changed in 13 years. I know that some of us asked at every change that's been done, is this going to be it? Do you think you're going to need more? Well, that's an unfair question, to be honest with you, because the people who are working through that process can't see the future. Maybe they can see it a little better than we can because they know more about what's going on behind closed doors and probably have some classified information that we don't have access to as to what the plans are for tactics and styles of combat and capabilities and hardware and all that stuff. But it's an unfair question to say, are you ever going to need any more? Okay, so let's just start with that. It's also a legitimate concern that a lot of us have heard and expressed that the military keeps taking more. And history would agree with that, actually. The military airspace has expanded. It has not shrunk in total area. It has changed, but it's always been expanding. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here with this. So when we say things like that, it's not very helpful, I guess is where I'm starting off with. The military is not asking for airspace because they hate us. They're not asking for airspace because they're trying to take over Alaska and make it impossible for us to live our life. Now, it is important for us to explain to the military why their proposal may impact our ability to live our life. And that's part of a good comment for the comment period. So why the change? Why is it changing again? Why are they asking for more airspace? And I'll show some graphics here in a bit to show you exactly what they're looking at to do. And it's big. It's a lot of area. They need more contiguous areas to train for the current fight. That's almost a direct quote from what they've been asking. There's some things that have changed with the capabilities of our aircraft. The 4th and 5th generation fighters need more airspace to do what they do. And we'll get to some of that here more in just a minute. I'm kind of skipping around my notes here, but here's what they're proposing. Removing the Stony, the Susitna, the Galena MOAs. So they're going to give those areas up. But they're expanding the JPARC, the areas that are east of Eielson Air Force Base and then go up to the north, up to the north slope. They're going to expand those areas, The Gulf of Alaska, where they've had some airspace down there that they use in their major force exercises like Red Flag, they're going to expand those areas and going to use those areas more frequently than they have in the past. And the biggest change is there is some massive areas out to the west that they are proposing to use. Now, the good thing is not all of these areas are going to be hot all the time. And not all of these areas are going to be hot at the same time. But during major force exercises, a lot of it will be active. Some areas will be active in the morning, some areas will be active in the afternoon, maybe one day this area, the next day that area. So this is where it's important to check your NOTAMs, actually. Here's what they're proposing. Right now, presently using airspace about 60 days a year to 70 days a year, and that's for the major force exercises. The routine training is probably going to be increased along with that. So here's what they're talking about. Go from 27,000 sorties, so that's a number of flights in a year, to 34,350 is what their proposal says. So that's not an insignificant change. It's less than 10,000 increased, but that's a lot of flights. 34, almost, yeah, we'll just say 34,000. We'll round it down. We'll be generous. 34,000 flights in a year is a lot. So, yeah, I don't fly that near that much. But when we take in all the military aircraft, that's each aircraft is part of that sortie number. So. The other thing that we need to make sure we're clear about is that they are not asking for any additional restricted areas. These are only MOAs, military operation areas. Now, go back to flight school, to ground school, go back to the conversation about airspace. Restricted areas you can't get into unless you have a clearance to get in there, or the restricted area is cold. And you can't get a clearance to get in there unless you're part of the fight. Now, MOAs, military operations areas, you can get in those areas, VFR. You don't have to have a clearance. Technically, you don't have to talk to anybody. Should you talk to somebody? Absolutely. The Special Use Airspace Information Service, SUAS, which was part of the 1995 Record of Decision, gives us the ability to talk to military air traffic controllers to know what's going on inside these military operations areas, to also notify them of where we are and where we're going so that we can deconflict with the traffic. I will tell you that the Alaska Airmen's Association is going to stand firm, and probably a mountain that we are going to be willing to die on trying to make sure that we maintain is Special Use Information Service. We want to make sure that that service stays. We want to make sure that that service increases commensurate to the increase in airspace with this proposal. It has proven to be a very safe method of deconflicting traffic. There has not been a civilian to military midair in military airspace since that service has been enacted. We want to see that service continue and expand at the same areas that the airspace is being proposed to expand. Might be a good thing for you to comment on in your comment period about that. Again, just because you can fly into a military operations area VFR doesn't necessarily mean that you should. You may want to schedule some of your time when those areas turn off or on to be out of the way of that. Now, it's difficult to do that, I'll admit, when we look at these areas and how big they are, whether or not you can adjust your day and your routine. Here's the problem. IFR traffic is not allowed in a military operations area when it is active. The Part 135 operators have been encouraged and I'll say pressed by the FAA as part of their op specs to fly IFR as much as possible, and some of them are told that they're mandated to fly IFR even in VFR, in VMC conditions. So when we look at the areas that they're proposing turning into military operations areas, which by the way starts at 500 foot for most of these areas, 500 foot above ground, we're not going to be able to get 135 operators in that airspace on their normal flights to service and maintain transportation services to the rural and remote communities because they can't go in their IFR. The FAA is wanting them to fly IFR because they're in better contact with ATC and with their company. There's higher standards for routing and just all the things that go along with making flying safer when you fly IFR. Yeah, and again, even in VMC conditions, but these areas will be off limits to IFR traffic because Anchorage Center no longer controls that airspace. That airspace is now controlled by the military when it's active. The military does not operate and control civilian traffic. And so we have proposed in the past, and we didn't really get much traction with it, but we're going to propose it again, that if the military wants this airspace, and if they want to use it as much as they're talking about using it, we cannot have our communities blockaded by airspace. And I know that's a strong term, but that's in effect what happens. When airspace is shut off and there's no access, a community has now become blockaded. And we know that blockades are not good when it comes to living your life and getting goods and supplies and medevacs and all those things in and out. So another thing that we're going to bring up once again in this proposal is that the military and Anchorage Center coordinate somehow, and I know this is going to be different from the rules as they exist today, but to explore the concept of allowing civilian IFR traffic into a military operations area when it's active. So, so that's what they're proposing. I've got these graphics that kind of show how big these things are. There's 3 proposals. Actually, there's 4 proposals. Let's just be generous and say there's 4. We all know that the 4th one's not really a proposal or an option. The 4th one is a no action, no changes. We're going to stick with what we have today. I don't see that happening, to be honest with you. One alternative, and with these graphics up, I'll show you, not all of these areas are in all 3 proposals, but depending on what works best for airspace management and other things, there's 3 alternatives that are listed here. Specific differences are mainly in the western parts of the state as we go and we look at those things. So why are they proposing this? We talked a little bit about that briefly at the beginning, but we're going to circle back to that now. Why are they proposing this? Aerial combat has changed. We don't fight the way that we used to. We don't fight the way that we did 13 years ago. The F-35 has come online since then. The F-22s were just starting to become active, and we weren't really sure how we were going to integrate the F-22s into the arsenal. Now that the F-35 and the F-22s are working together, and we've still got the F-16s, part of the aggressor squadron up here, how's that all that play together? We also bring our coalition partners up here to Alaska to train with us. We bring all the other assets that we have in our military inventory here in Alaska. Things have changed with the 4th and 5th generation fighters. They no longer have to be in close proximity to engage a threat. They also don't have to be in close proximity of a threat to be engaged. So 250 miles or so, they can engage with a target. They themselves could be engaged by an enemy and never actually have visual contact with each other and have missiles in the air. Now, obviously, we're not going to be shooting missiles at each other in these military operations areas because that's just not the way we train. But they need to simulate all those things. And so they need the airspace to do that, and they need a big enough area that they can have a threat 250 miles away and start engaging with that target. The other thing that has changed is that because of our detect capabilities have increased and our enemies' detect capabilities have also kept pace, these aircraft no longer get high and fast to stay out of detection range. They have to stay low and fast to stay undetected. I know that the F-35 and the F-22 are stealth, or at least stealthy. That doesn't mean they're invisible and they cannot be detected. They can, and they need to be able to get down low and avoid detection. The F-35 has also been tasked with close air support and ground support, And so they need to be down low for that. You know, the A-10 had fulfilled that role in the past and still does today, and they keep talking about decommissioning the A-10s, but they keep stretching it out. Personally, I think the A-10 is an awesome, awesome platform. It's just a cool airplane, and that's just my personal opinion. But anyway, I know technology is changing, and the A-10 is a much easier target to take out than an F-35, and so we're making those changes in our arsenal as well. So they need these areas to be able to do those longer range engagements. They need these areas down low so they can practice their avoidance techniques and be able to avoid detection. So that's why they're saying they need these big, long stretches, over 500 miles long. I mean, that's big, right? So there's a video on the JPARC Airspace EIS website, and I'll put that link in the description to remind you how to find that, and a specific link to this video that walks you through their proposal and why they're proposing what they're doing and what they need. And now I've mentioned there were 3 alternatives that were being proposed. Actually, a 4th alternative is that they take no action and leave things the way they are today. That's not going to happen. We know that's not going to happen, but they have to put that in there as a possibility. So here's the thing. Comments are due by February 9th, not very far off. This is the public scoping phase. This is not the final opportunity for us to participate. We'll still have another option to participate later on. This is the initial scoping phase that then they will take our comments, work that into their proposal, maybe change a few things, try to figure out a better way to accommodate their needs and our needs. So this is why it's very important that we participate early. We need to let them know what our big concerns are, what our major issues are, what the things are that we must have in order for them to be able to use this, like special use airspace information service, like the ability to still have IFR, civilian IFR traffic inside an active MOA, which up till today is not possible. We're going to propose that, the Airmen's Association. Access to remote areas and remote communities, impacts on wildlife and hunting seasons and all those things. Access into remote communities, remote areas for not just recreation, but for livelihood, mining sites, all kinds of things. This goes way beyond just aviation. The phrase that is used, social and environmental impacts. That's a pretty broad term, and there's a lot of things that are included with social and environmental impacts. So that's the things that they're asking us to comment on in this initial comment period. I'll put a flow chart up throughout this time here to show you what the process is, the timeline is. So what is a good comment and what is a bad comment? A bad comment, part of this process, so let's just first clear up how this works. You submit a comment, they have to adjudicate the comment, meaning they have to acknowledge the comment, say, restate the problem, and propose either how they disagree that it's a problem or how they plan to mitigate that problem. If you make a comment that's saying this is bad, this is an airspace grab, this is nothing more than the government trying to take over and rule our lives, they're not going to do anything with that comment. You didn't offer any possible solution. You didn't offer up any reasons for them not to do what they're proposing to do. A good comment is saying, hey, you are making it incredibly difficult for us to get to remote communities. The FAA is proposing mandating 135s go IFR. Can't do that and do this. So that's an example of stating a problem and then offering a solution. We need to state problems because they may not have thought of all these. Be honest with you, I'm sure they haven't thought of all of them. How could they think of all of them? Because they're not perfect and all-knowing. And so it's our job to help them with that. It's not our job to sit there and berate them. We need to be helpful. We need to have some constructive comments so that when they look at that comment, they know that they can't ignore that comment. They have to adjudicate it. They have to actually work that comment. So if you want some more information about how to form a good comment, reach out to me. I'll help you. The Airmen's Association is going to come out with some talking points. We are not going to write your comment for you. Form letter comments are ineffective. This needs to be in your own words and your own issues. We will help you as the Airmen's Association with the issues that we have heard and what we think are going to be problematic for this proposal, and encourage you to comment on those. We also, please do me a favor. I don't know everything either, so let me know what the problems are that you may see with this proposal, because that could help us form our comments. So there is some opportunities for you to file some public comments. I've got some concerns about that, to be honest with you. As of the time I'm recording this, there has not been resolution to my satisfaction on this issue. We've had several people reach out to us saying that the online form that is part of the website, the JPARC airspace.com website, they've had difficulty submitting their comments via their online web-based form, primarily with the CAPTCHA function, I'm not a robot kind of questions and things that happen there. That has prevented several people that have reached out to us that they've not been able to do that. It's my experience when I have one person reach out and say they had difficulty, that there's at least 5 others that also had difficulty that did not reach out to me. I can tell you that we have multiple tens of people, maybe more, that have not had the ability to participate in the public process because of a problem with the website. I did hear back from the military that they have temporarily disabled the CAPTCHA function, but that it will be reinstated again. So if you're having difficulty submitting your comments online, please let me know. Absolutely, you need to let me know, because we need to document this, because if people are being disenfranchised from the public process, we need to make sure that that is addressed and dealt with appropriately. The only other way to submit a comment is in writing and mailing it through the U.S. Postal Service. I have been told that the contractor and that the military will not have an email address to be able to submit your comments. I hope that changes. I desperately hope that changes. Every other public comment period I've been involved with of this level and of this significance, there has been an email address where we can email our comments to. If we are not allowed to have emails, correspondence back and forth with our comments, and it is limited only to in writing, a physical piece of paper being mailed through the post office or through an online form, I'm just going to be blunt. That's unacceptable to the Alaska Airmen's Association. There needs to be an email address where we can submit this stuff, that we don't have to go through a web-based browser and go through some process that has been demonstrated and shown that people have difficulty submitting their comments. And if people have difficulty submitting comments, they are disenfranchised in the process, and it points to a flawed process, and that's problems, especially with this very rigid National Environmental Policy Act process. It's there to be in place so that people are not disenfranchised. And I'm getting a little worked up right now because I feel like folks are being disenfranchised from this process, and I am dissatisfied with the solution as we have at the time of this recording. I hope that that will change. I hope that I can come back to you later and say that we have an email address and that we have a verified, proven, nobody's having any problems submitting their comments via the web-based form. But right now, I don't. And I've reached out and I've gotten some response that I have already said I am unsatisfied with. So, moving on, because obviously I'm pretty spun up about that. The other way that you can participate, there will be some virtual public meetings. There will be no in-person meetings. The last go-around 13 years ago, we had a long series of in-person public meetings. The world's changed a little bit in 13 years. Virtual meetings are now normal and standard. Would I prefer there to be a face-to-face meeting? Absolutely. I think that you get better participation that way. But they've determined that they will only hold virtual meetings. And the 4 dates that they will be held, the dates and times, I'm just going to read them off here, but they are listed on that JPARC airspace.com website. Saturday, January 24th at 10 a.m. Monday, January 6th at 6 p.m. Wednesday, January 28th at 6 p.m., Thursday, January 29th at 10 a.m. They will be giving a briefing as to what their proposal is. There'll be some interaction. I encourage you to participate in those virtual meetings to make sure you fully comprehend what their proposals are. If you want to know what the actual Federal Register, Federal Notice, public notice says, I'll give a link in the description to that public notice. Again, the JPARC airspace EIS.com is the website to go look at some graphics of their proposals. Some of them I've posted up here to look at the timeline of their proposal and then be able to have access to that web-based form, which I really hope you don't have problems with. And if you do, I need to hear about it to be able to submit your comments on this page. So again, this is just the public scoping phase for a massive, major redesign of the military operations areas here in the state of Alaska. And we will have other opportunities to comment in this public process, but this public scoping phase is vitally important, incredibly important. I don't know what other words to use to get across to you how important it is for you to submit comments and to submit good comments, not just, I don't like it. You're taking all my airspace away. How am I going to live my life? You need to explain why this is difficult for you. You need to explain why this is a problem for you. Again, social and environmental impacts. And environmental impacts does not just limit itself to what it does for some endangered species. Environmental impacts deals with socioeconomic impacts. It deals with the cost that it's going to be on you to fly around this airspace if you need to, instead of having to be able to just go through and do what you've been doing forever. All the things that you could possibly think that your life is going to change because of this, that's what you need to comment on. You need to state the problem and you need to offer solutions. Okay? That's what a good comment is. And right now, the only two ways to offer those comments is in writing, putting it in an envelope and mailing it through the post office, or submitting it on an online web-based form. Again, I really hope that they will come up with an email address where we can email these comments directly to, because every other public process I've participated in, email has been an option. I don't know why they don't want to do it. And again, I've reached out, tried to get some feedback, and was told today that they have no plans and no intention of having an email address. That's disappointing. All right, I've taken up way more than what we normally do, 12 minutes more than what we normally do. A couple of other things that I'm working on. Obviously, these are not the only two, but these are big ones, and one of them, obviously, very big. So again, look in the description for all those links that I told you I would put up. Stop the video, go back and watch it, look at those graphics again, do all those things. And while you're doing all this stuff, make sure you go buy a raffle ticket, will you? We got a great four-place experimental cub that we're building. Got some folks, great folks over in Cordova that are building this year's raffle airplane. Tickets are on sale now. Go to our website, alaskaairmen.org, and find out more about the Airmen's Association. If you're not a member, please consider joining. It's what helps funds and adds your name to the long list of other people that when I go and advocate on your behalf, having your name and voice added to the 2,000 plus others makes a difference. It really does. All right, with that, I'll say goodbye for now. Stay tuned for more information and more updates. Look in your emails, look on social media. We'll be posting more information as we find out more and as we go through this process. Thanks for being here.